Welcome to another edition of the Learning Journey podcast. Wayne Heinsohn is my name. I am your host today as we head off to Papua New Guinea, and we're going to chat with Dom Sant. Now, he's got a long job title, Program Safety Manager and Technical Training Specialist. We will get some idea what that actually means and what it looks like on the ground, but let's welcome him first to the Learning Journey podcast. Hey, Dom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Wayne. Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Now, you were saying before we started recording, you're just a little bit nervous. You're kind of not sure where this conversation's going to take us. And I just want to put you at ease, Dom, because I've got no idea where it's going to take us either. But that's part of the learning journey. It's about, hey, let's go on the journey together.
Absolutely. Yeah, a little bit out of my comfort zone. But I think when we talk about learning, often you are out your comfort zone and you're looking to try new things and do new things.
Yeah. Hey, I want to get to your current role, but I think for us to sort of talk about what you do now, we really need to press rewind and kind of journey through some of the journey, I guess, you know, to get you to that point. So as I understand it, you sort of started professional life as an apprentice and you were building plane engines at Rolls-Royce. Is that kind of where professional life started for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that I feel like I was born with a golden spoon in my mouth in terms of my professional life. They don't get much bigger than Rolls-Royce in organizations. And I was lucky enough to do an engineering apprenticeship with them, where they put me through a degree and they put me through loads of really good training to get to the point where I could become a professional engine fitter.
And was that always on the radar for you? Because I know you kind of transitioned from aircraft into submarines, and I really want to talk about that because I think that's just, I'm fascinated by it. So I kind of want to hear the story. But like in terms of aviation, was it always something growing up, you know, as a teenager or as a boy where you thought, this is an area where I'd love to spend my life working?
Yeah, aviation has always been a passion of mine. My dad was an aviation enthusiast, as he likes to be called, definitely not a plane spotter. And he took me around lots of airports when I was younger. And even now I can stand at the front of the airport here and watch one of the big planes take off and think how amazing it is that something that heavy can get up into the sky. So I had a very early interest in all things aviation, and then mechanical items is the other side of things. So I would often be taking things apart. I still remember in my apprenticeship interview telling them that I would always be really keen to take stuff apart and then admitting that maybe they don't always go back together again. I'm wondering whether I'd made a mistake in telling them that I can't stick things back together again once I take them apart.
Well, I'm very skilled at that as well, Dom. Fantastic at taking things apart. And then somehow I end up with more pieces than I began with. So I'm not really sure what happens there. Hey, but tell us about like Dad being the aviation enthusiast. I love you said he's not a plane spotter, but let's move on. But being the aviation enthusiast, what did you learn from him? You know, just hanging out with him, you know, seeing planes, being around in that sort of atmosphere. What did you sort of learn from Dad? And maybe not even, you know, in a formal sense, because so much of our learning is informally acquired.
Yeah, I always remember whenever I speak to my dad, even now, his encyclopedic knowledge of aeroplanes of all types and sizes, and you send him a picture, he'll tell you exactly what it is and tell you where the company is based. And just over the years, he has built up this incredible knowledge just because he's passionate about it. It's never been his job. So all of the things that he's learnt, all of this incredible knowledge that he's built up is because he's really passionate about it, and it's something that he loves to be involved with. And I think, yeah, seeing that acted out has been a real part of my life and my love of aviation as well.
And that's one of the things actually we've touched on a previous episode of the podcast. I think talking with Peter Fried, it might have been, you know, the importance of passion, that sometimes it's the bridge between the skills that you have and the skills that you need. You know, passion can actually be the thing that sort of bridges that gap.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's the passion, and then there's finding that little niche where you fit well, isn't there? It's finding the roles that fit your skill set and your personality well. I think those two things are really, really important, rather than just the technical expertise, because if you enjoy your job and you're passionate about it, you quite quickly learn how to do the doing part of it.
Yeah. Hey, I mentioned earlier, because this fascinates me, I've done some reading to prepare for our chat today, that you went from stripping and building, I think, turbine or jet engines to working on submarines. Talk to us about that transition. One, how does it happen? And two, What do you need to acquire? I assume there's some sort of crossover between aviation and submarines, although I don't really know. But I also assume, I'll make this assumption, that there are many things that are completely different. And so you step into a new role and you now need to learn a whole bunch of new skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I switched into nuclear. So still with the same company, Rolls-Royce. A little known secret, Rolls-Royce make the nuclear reactors for the nuclear submarine. So I finished my time on the shop floor doing building jet engines, and I went into the office and started helping with the training and competency system, but quite quickly got bored of that system. Just wasn't the right fit. So I was looking around at different opportunities. I was at a real crossroads in my career. So I was a project engineer for a while, but then really missed the operations side of things, missed seeing things going out on the shop floor and the real hustle and bustle of operations. So I applied for a role in the facility that does nuclear processing of uranium and things like that. And this whole time is just a continual barrage of the senses of learning new things and getting to grips with new regulations, and so many great mentors over the years to show you how you have to do things. I still remember day one turning up in my new role as managing one of the uranium processing plant, and something quite minor went wrong, and the guy who had been there a long time was able to kind of articulate in a very British way, right, you need to do this, and then you need to do this, and then you need to do this. And I just remember standing there thinking, how on earth am I going to be able to get to that stage that this person's at, where they could just reflex, they knew who to call, they knew what their number was, and they would get hold of them and they would deal with this issue really quickly. Within a year, 18 months, that was me. I was able to do that because it was, again, it's part of the learning journey, isn't it? Is you pick up these skills and then become more reflective, and you take those pieces of knowledge and they kind of just embed themselves somewhere in the back of your brain, ready to pop up when the time is right.
Now, one of the things I love about MAF is that it's a growing organization. There are new staff coming in. But as you just sort of touched on, when you head into a new organization and or a new role, there's this kind of learning overload, like there's a bunch of things that you have to absorb, whether that's through your induction, whether that's culturally, whether it's to do with the role that you're taking on. So I wonder, from your experience personally, but also as a trainer, what are some skills, I guess, or what are some tips to get through that sense of feeling like overloaded or overwhelmed with the amount that you need to actually learn?
Absolutely. It's a really good question. One of the things I love about my role profile with MAF is right at the bottom, after you've read about all the things you're going to be doing, it tells you how long is expected before you are up to anything like full capacity. And I think that is a really, really helpful piece of information, because for that first 6 months, you need to be aware that you need to be kind to yourself. Because one of your biggest blockers can be that internal monologue telling you, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. And that itself drags your kind of morale and your mood down. If you put into that as well the idea of transition, and maybe going to a new place, a new sights and smells and tastes and feels and everything else that goes with it, it's really easy to get overloaded. Our first few weeks in PNG, when we arrived here, we were jet lagged after 30 hours worth of traveling in the UK, from the UK to PNG, and it just felt hard. But as the months tick by, as you're kind to yourself, as you recognize that sometimes you're going to be very tired because you have been taking a lot on that day, and you listen to those around you and you take on board what they say, you slowly pick up and you get to the point where all of a sudden you realize that you have knowledge that you didn't know you had. And it takes you by surprise almost. You cross over from knowing that you don't know things to the other side of things, which is you're not thinking you know things, but you actually do know them. And that confidence to actually act and go, do you know what, I'm becoming competent at my role now, and I need to give myself that confidence to act in the role.
Hey, Dom, I want to talk about the second part, I think it is, of your job title, which is technical training specialist. What does that actually mean? Like, take us to, a day or a week in the life of Dom Sant in PNG. What does it mean to be a technical training specialist? What does it look like?
Yeah, so that side of the role, a 70-30% split in terms of safety manager and helping with training. And that is really about governance of our training process. So one of the things I love about MAF is that they're really keen to invest in national staff within the countries that they work. And my role, I've got a heap of experience previously from training apprentices. So I'm supporting the engineering team. The engineering team here do the bulk of the work of the actual training, and I'm here to support them to try and bridge some links back to people like you mentioned, Peter earlier, Peter Fry in the UK, who does a lot of engineering training stuff, and putting the policies in place, the processes in place, and then governing them to make sure that the guys who come through, we get the best apprentices in the door, and then we make sure that we manage them well and look after them really well so that they're able to go on and have really successful careers, whether that continue with math or whether we send them out into the wider industry and they go and bless other people through their kind of Christian walk in a different part of the industry.
So as a training specialist, define success. What does that look like? Because that's a word that means many different things to many different people. But what does it mean for you in your current role?
So for me, it looks like the apprentices that we have the people who are here to learn how to be aviation fitters and how engineers, that they are able to pass their exams, they're able to get their licenses, and they're able to go into successful careers as licensed engineers.
Now, one of the things that when we first connected, we wanted to talk about was Power BI, because we live in a world where data is so valuable and it can be used for good. And dare I say, it can be used for things that are not good, but we won't go there. You took a couple of days off, I think it was, to actually figure out Power BI and how you could use it on the ground there in PNG in your role at MAF. So 2 questions for you. Very briefly, can you explain Power BI? Secondly, can you explain why you thought it was so important to actually clear your calendar for a couple of days to get your head around this, and how as an organisation we can actually use Power BI?
Yeah, great. So Power BI is a tool that's used, and what you're able to do is create from lots of data sources. You're able to kind of pull them together into one place, and you're able to use the data sources together quite harmoniously to create graphics and to visualize your data. You can really plan your organization around it, and you can look for good kind of trends in the data. You can look for bad trends in the data. And it used to be the kind of thing that an organization would have whole departments, business analysts and alike, would sit there and they would use tools like Microsoft Excel, which is very highly specialized, and you need to know lots of back-end formulas and things like that to be able to make even some of the simpler graphs to understand your business. And then a while ago, Microsoft created Power BI. And the idea is that is taking it away from needing to be big teams to make it so that the individual is able to look at data themselves, and they're able to be a little bit more user-friendly, I guess, than Excel. And that was my intention. So I found out about Power BI. I'd seen it had been used elsewhere already within MAF to great effect, taking information from places like Wingman and different sources that we have available to us, and looking at how effective we are in the mission. Well, I work in safety, and one of the key things that we want to look for is we're trying to predict the future sometimes. We're trying to look at where we have a series of events or incidents, and we want to look forward to see where that may leave us risk for another accident or an incident. We might want to look where we're having a strong reporting culture and where we're not having a strong reporting culture, which might mean we're missing out on the opportunity to improve. So I saw Power BI, and instantly I kind of use Excel quite a bit, and I spent a lot of time playing around with that. So part of it, again, was that interest. It piqued my interest. But it's the kind of program, I think, with a lot of these computer programs, that unless you learn to use it well, you will just kind of pick around with it and never really achieve anything. So I decided I would clear my calendar for a couple of days, and I found some free online training for Power BI called Dashboard in a Day. It was a course, one of these that gives you all the course files, all the data and everything that you can play around with, and you follow along with a tutorial, and it teaches you how to use the program, which is an incredible time. I think time well spent. And
quite remarkable, I think, given PNG is not known for its fantastic internet speeds and connectivity. So well done for you for persevering through, because, often, and it might not be internet, for others, it might be time, it might be family commitments, it might be workload. Often one of the challenges with embracing any new learning is actually making space for it.
Absolutely. And I think the busier you get, often the easier it is. As I said before, I spent 19 years in Rolls-Royce, and especially looking back over the last few years, I've spent very little time where I've just focused on development. And what that often means is you stand still and you don't stay up to date with some of the latest advancements. You don't learn new things, and you don't stay fresh in your career. So taking a little bit of time out, I think is actually that I've had the time back since doing the training in the effort that has been saved with being able to use Power BI effectively to do my job better. I think I probably had 2 days worth of time back with not fiddling around with formulas in Excel and things like that.
And I think that's one of the great ways to look at it. Often we can see that there's a cost associated with like time for learning, but I would actually prefer if the conversation was around, well, I'm investing this time and there will be a return that actually comes back on that investment. For you, it's saving time mucking around with, with Excel. For other people, it might be different things down the track.
Yes, and I don't think it matters what it is you're learning. You look at where you could do with improving within your role, and you look at where there are opportunities. I'm a big fan of things like podcasts. There are lots of podcasts, so leadership podcasts and things like that, where you just in your spare time, washing the dishes, whatever it is, you've got an opportunity for a little interject of something that you can learn from. And I think that making time, it's all about the intentionality, isn't it? You have to choose that you're going to be someone who continues to develop throughout their career, not someone who gets so far and goes, well, actually, do you know what? I'm happy with where I am now. But someone who is actually going to be really keen to push on and learn new things.
Yeah, we call that continuous learning in the L&D department because we should all be lifelong learners. Hey, Dom, as we come to a close, I want to go back in time if I can, and I want to maybe have you talk to the 16, 17-year-old Dom Sant who's got MAF on his heart, and then an accident stops that from happening. And, what would you say to a younger you in terms of the importance of learning, the importance of growth, the importance of developing, the importance of like sewing into yourself?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I would say to myself is that I have to trust that God is in control with all areas of my life, including the scenarios, the jobs, the places he puts me. I can clearly see back through my life that God has been weaving tapestry and showing me to the point where I can get to do the role I'm doing now. I've always been keen on learning. I've always been keen on what's the next thing that I can kind of get my sticky paws on. What's the next thing I can learn and look at? But I think the biggest thing for me would be to trust that God has a plan for my life, and that those situations, no matter where I find myself, whether it's a good encounter or a bad encounter, that God is something to teach me through that. Whether it's a job I didn't get that I wanted to get, or whether it was a training course I wanted to go on that I didn't go on, or whether it was one that I went on and didn't think was much cut, God will still teach and will still be weaving that tapestry in the background.
And let's get a little theoretical. Let's go ahead 5 years. What will you say to the future Dom Sant?
Well, I would hope that the future Dom Sant is still learning, is still pushing on, and I would just remind myself to do exactly what I did this time in the Power BI, and just take some time, look at where there are things that need improving, things that need tightening up, strengthening, and look at what training solutions there are to help with that.
Well, maybe in 2028, Dom, we'll catch up again and we'll replay this part of the podcast, and then we'll see if you were spot on.
Great.
Hey, Dom, thanks so much for joining us. I do really appreciate it, and just really appreciate you sharing some of your wisdom, some of your journey with us today on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's always fascinating, isn't it? Hearing the learning journey of MAF staff. And a big thank you to our guest today, Program Safety Manager and Technical Training Specialist Dom Sant, for sharing his journey. And while you might not have 2 days that you can set aside for learning, maybe this week you can find an extra 30 minutes to spend on your professional or personal development. As Dom mentioned, the first step is to prioritize learning in your schedule. Now, on the next episode of the podcast, we head to Uganda and chat with a lady who has a love for learning as well as developing people. We do hope you can join us for that. And if you've got a learning journey that you would love to share here on the podcast, please get in touch with us via our email address, learning.development@mafint.org. Now remember, when you invest in your learning, the sky's the limit.